Okay, we are recording this. So what's going to happen is that Ben is going to speak for roughly the next hour and 20 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to questions. And what we would like just for efficiency is for you to type your questions in the chat. And then I will relay them to Ben. So now it is Ben's turn and we look forward to this presentation.
Oh, my turn. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. I appreciate it. I was expecting the screen to open up, but it didn't. Yes, my friends, I come to you from an era in history where civilization lost its humanity. It's hard. A time when there were only three kinds of people in this world. There were the killers, the victims, and the bystanders. The rest of the world, the entire world, was always bystanders. No one said a word.
He's cool.
Okay. As Dr. Marshall mentioned, I come from a wonderful family of 7. And here are the pictures. You see my father, my mother, my oldest brother, my oldest sister, Goldie, and then Lola, my sister. Lola and I were the only 2 who survived the Holocaust. There's a picture of me and my little brother. And out of the whole family of 7, only the 2 of us survived. The rest of them were all slaughtered by the Nazis. This is a picture of my sister Lola that was taken a few years back. She passed about 3 years ago, natural causes. She was in her 90s. After the war, she had a pretty good life once the war was over. Before she went through hell just like I did. But she was never in a concentration camp.
Tonya, let me call you back. I'm in a lunch meeting.
Love you.
Love you.
Okay, I was. So we lived in Krakow, this beautiful 3-story apartment house on the ground floor. Looking at it from my left side, where it's shown to you, those 3 windows that you see are part of our apartment and goes way back into the back. And we were one Jewish family. The other Jewish family was on the other side, on my right side of the gate. There was a young couple, husband and wife, and they had 2 daughters, about a little younger than me. And the mother gave birth to an infant little boy about 2 months earlier. I'll get back to them in a little while. So one early in the morning, this whole building started to shake and rattle, just like an earthquake. I never experienced anything like that. And I ran to my window. The 3rd window was my bedroom. I looked out and I saw tanks were rolling down the street. And following the tanks, there were half-tracks. Every few steps, the soldier would jump out of the half-track. He'll get on the sidewalk with his rifle. And this is how they occupied the city. There was no fighting. Following them were the Wehrmacht, the foot soldiers with their shiny black boots and their goose steps. It was quite impressionable for a 11-year-old kid. I wasn't quite 11. I was 1 more month shy of 11 years old. And my whole world changed from that point on. My father's business was wine and syrup. He had the wine and syrup factory.
Oh, and now I can hear it. No one else can.
And besides the factory of wine and syrup,
I think I saw this one.
He had a chocolate factory. he was the first person to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, something like Kit Kat. In those days, it was very unusual. And it was in the shape of little animals with tinfoil on it, bears, rabbits, you know. And every day when he came home from work, us kids would search his pockets, and he always made sure he had some good goodies in there. I'll never forget those days, those beautiful chocolates that we were able to pull out of there. And all of this didn't last very long. In September of 1939, the whole world changed for me. When the Nazis marched in, we found out on the 5th day after occupation what Nazi brutality was all about. A truck pulls up to the gate of our building with soldiers, and they started to bang on the gate. The super came running out with the short tails hanging out. Well, what's going on? What's going on? And all they wanted to know where the Jewish people lived. He was quick to oblige. He says, one side pointing to us, there was a Jewish family, and the other side, a Jewish family, on the other side, that young couple. Well, they came and broke down the door, running in with sacks in their hands, open sacks, and pistol whipping us. We were all in bed, and they were screaming, throw in all your valuables, money, gold, silver, whatever they found valuables, they threw in and tore off my mother's chain and lock chain and my sister's ring. Don't ask. While they were beating up my father to open up the safe, my father was trying to open the safe, and all of a sudden we heard this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. And it was so loud and such fierce screaming that my sister Lola and I ran out through the kitchen door. Through their kitchen door, we went into their apartment, and this is what we saw. We saw this monster was holding the infant baby by its legs and swinging it and screaming to the parents, make him shut up. The parents and the daughters are screaming, our baby, don't hurt our baby. And with a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing. He smashes the baby's head into the doorpost, killing it instantly. That's a sight I'll never forget. Hearing this screaming baby in that sudden silence and seeing what came out of the head. All of us jumped on this monster, and when the other soldiers heard from our apartment that something is going on, they came running in. They pistol whipped us and they pulled us off of him. And they said to him, okay, Hans, let's go. They had sacks and they threw in all their valuables. They threw it in the truck and they took off. So that was the 5th days after occupation of Krakow. From this point on, things started getting bad, from bad to worse. All kind of new ordinances started coming in. There was a curfew for the Jewish people. We couldn't go out from 7 to 7. And the Star of David, the armbands that the Jewish people, a child of 6 years of age had to have a star armband. And from that point on, new ordinances came in. We couldn't travel anymore. We had to have new IDs. The ID had to have a big red J that they put in for Judah, Jewish. And now, if any of these ordinances were disobeyed in any way, there were no judges, no juries, not even a prison for the Jewish people. They simply shot you on the spot. And every morning you saw people with pushcarts go around and pick up dead bodies. It was awful. The Jewish people's businesses were confiscated. My father went to the business and there were guards stationed. They wouldn't even let him in, take his briefcase out of there. Confiscated. They chased him away. He went to the chocolate factory, the same thing. A man works all his life. You can't imagine the look on my father when he came home that morning. You couldn't recognize him. A man works hard all his life to build up a little business to support the family. And just like that, it's taken away from him. But it didn't stop there. A new ordinance came in that the Jewish people can no longer reside in Krakow. But they gave us a choice. That was the first time and the last time in history they ever gave us a choice. They said, okay, if you want to stay in Krakow, you're going to have to go into this ghetto. They made the ghetto in the worst part of Krakow, Poland. But the choice is you can go to a neighboring little community and live there as long as it was not in a big city. So surrounding Krakow, the little communities, is okay. My sister Lola was probably about 15, maybe 15 and a half at the time. But she had a pursuer, a young man who fell in love with her. And he comes to my father, he says, Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola. Someday I'd love to marry her, but do me a favor, I'll take care of everything for you. Please come to this community that my parents are going to. Give them a choice, going to a ghetto, which we really didn't know what it was at the time, or going to a small community in the outskirts of Krakow. My father agreed. And his name was Michael. And Michael hired a wagon with a horse and buggy driver, and we started to pack and load up the wagon. That's when we found out that my father had 1,000 American dollars saved up for a rainy day. That was a fortune in those days. He took that money and he pasted it into a religious prayer book, and he put it in a sack full of other kind of Jewish literature books. And we had 2 sacks full, and they said, put it on the wagon. And now we loaded everything that we were allowed to take. We were not allowed to take any furniture, but everything we can carry was okay. We loaded up the wagon, and we are now on our way to this small community called Nepolomice. As soon as we leave Krakow, outside of the ghetto, we're being stopped by the Nazis. Halt! And 2 husky soldiers jump on top of the wagon. And all they wanted to know, do you have any Jewish literature, Jewish books? And they saw 2 sacks full of books. So they picked them up and heaved it on the side of the road. There was a mountain of Jewish books. Every person who did not go into the ghetto had to cross this road to leave Krakow. So they were waiting there, and they were going to have a bonfire of all these books that they confiscated. My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German. We all spoke German to a degree, but she spoke a beautiful German. And she walks up to this monster and she says to him, look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book. He looked at her and he says, okay, maybe you like the way she spoke German. He says, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes if you can find it. So you can imagine all of us started climbing on this mountain of books to try and find this one book with the money. And as we are climbing, we keep sliding down. And after 5 minutes, he chased us away. And here we are leaving now, family of 6. We're a family of 7, but my sister Goldie is a Munkach with her mother's side of grandparents. My father was born in Krakow, and his family comes from Krakow, Poland. And my mother's side of the family, Munkach, Hungary. So every year, my mother would take us kids to Munkach in the summer to spend the summer with her family. In the winter, we would come back to Krakow to go to school and be with my father and his business. When the war broke out, my oldest sister was kind of stuck in Hungary, in Munkach, with my grandparents and uncles and aunts and cousins, which was good because Hungary was a free country. Poland was occupied, obviously. So now we're coming to this house, this little farmhouse that you see. By the way, all these pictures that you're going to see are pictures that were drawn by my sister Lola, my surviving sister. She drew them 5 years after the war from memory. But this was the farmhouse that Michael rented for us. One half of it was for us. The other half, the farmer, the apple orchard farmer lived there. And between the 2 apartments, there was a big baking oven where people would bake their breads and whatever. You can just imagine my father's face when he arrived, and he has a family of 6, and he doesn't know how he's going to feed them. It's not like he can get a job. Jewish people were not allowed to be hired. So how is he going to feed the family? You could see it in his face. And when we came in, and my future brother-in-law, Michael, heard what happened to my father's, that everything was taken away, he brought my father a sack full of flour, 100 pounds of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread to feed the family, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. And those ingredients he had. Now he took those pretzels to the neighboring bars and he offered it for sale. It was a novelty, and they started to buy the pretzels. Now my father had a couple dollars. He can afford to bake a bread for the family to eat. And from this point on, he became a little baker in this community. And I remember I was about 12 years old at that time, and I baked with him. So to this day, I still remember how to bake certain things, not everything, but certain things, because they didn't have recipes in those days. Everything was done by memory, you know. Anyway, meanwhile, Michael and Lola got engaged, and they're marrying. The marriage was in the backyard of that house. And these are the wedding guests that came. It's mostly family. There were more than this picture shows. They don't show my father, my older brother. There were approximately about 30 of us, and that was illegal. Other than family members, you were not allowed to have more than 4 people, Jewish people, gathering together. But they took a chance. And in the yard, out of these 30 people, only 3 of us survived. Michael, my brother-in-law, Lola, my sister, and myself. Just the 3 of us. Everybody else in this picture was slaughtered. In this white little suit, this is my little brother, Tuli, and my mother, he's leaning against my mother. And that was Michael's mother next to her and Michael's sister, the whole family. So it breaks my heart when I look at this picture and I saw those faces. None of them survived except the 3 of us. Michael and Lola rented an apartment. Excuse me. It was a duplex. On one side of the duplex lived the owner, and the owner happened to be the mayor of that community out of Nepolomice, the mayor. One day he comes home, he says, Michael and Lola, save yourselves. I heard there's going to be a podlava, means a raid against the Jewish people, either tonight or tomorrow night. When Michael heard that, he went out and he hired a wagon with a driver, horse and buggy. In the middle of the night, we snuck out, we put everything on the wagon. And the only place the wagon can drive to was to Bochnia. That was the nearest city to Nepolomice, in Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. So that meant we had to go inside the ghetto. And Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. Why? What happened? Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come inside the ghetto, and the soldiers would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds and throw them into these dump trucks. Baby, children, anything they can find that's like under 15 years old, they were throwing into these dump trucks. As they filled up 2 or 3 dump trucks, they would start to pull out of the ghetto. As they're pulling out, the parents were running behind these trucks and screaming for their children. Their children are screaming for their trots for their parents from the truck. These cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck.
Recording in progress.
Pardon me?
Pardon me?
Anyone talking to me? No, okay. They had machine guns at the end of each truck. And as the parents were running behind these trucks, screaming for their children, they opened up the machine gun fire and they mowed down the parents. Now this happened 2 or 3 times, and it resonated throughout Europe. Everybody knew, stay away from Bochnia Ghetto because of these atrocities. But we had no chance. We had to go there. And it was easy to get inside the ghetto. The driver had to leave his license or his ID with the guards, and he took us in. He made us unload in the middle of a street. We unloaded, and suddenly Michael sees his school friend. His name was Farber. And I forgot his first name. His name was Farber, and he says to him, "What are you doing here?" Farber is asking him. Farber was dressed like a policeman. He had a uniform, and he had no weapons. He had a baton on the side of his leg, and he wore a hat. Farber says to Michael, "What are you doing?" Michael is telling him this story, and Farber says, "Don't worry, I'll find you a place," and he took him to a place. Now, Farber was a Jewish policeman inside the ghetto. They had Jewish policemen whose job was to keep order inside the ghetto. And if the Nazis wanted some labor people to come out of the ghetto to dig ditches or something, they would order the Jewish policemen and they would have to find the man and bring him out. So this was their job. Farber found a place for Michael and Lola and his side of the family, an apartment. But other people, I don't know. But then they found a place for us. Just to tell you what the living conditions were like in a ghetto. There were 8 other people in one room, and now there were 12. There were 8 plus 4 of us. Now we're 12 people of us inside this room. And there was old broken down furniture. You saw a table, broken down chairs, a little stove, and an ice box. They had a big ice box there. And there were no beds. All we had was straw on the ground, and there were blankets on top of the straw. There were blankets hanging from the ceiling, separating every family from each other. And imagine 12 of us in this one room. There was no indoor plumbing or anything like that. They had an outdoor house, and everyone inside the ghetto had to work. If you didn't work, you didn't get any rations. My job was working in a uniform factory. I sewed on buttons on the uniforms. It wasn't a hard job, but it was like 13 hours every day, very little food. And that's all it was, labor, work and labor. There's nothing, no time left for anything else. Excuse me. In this rooms that we lived was also a nice armoire where you hang your coats and jackets. You see a picture of it there, and was a little odd because all the other junky furniture, and this was nice looking, but I didn't pay attention to it. One day, Farber went to Michael and he says, Michael, I heard a rumor there's going to be a raid tonight or tomorrow, possibly tonight. Hide yourselves, Lola, hide yourselves. Well, ever since those trucks would come in the middle of the night and pick out children from their beds, every house and every apartment had a hiding place. They called it a bunker. That's when I found out. Our hiding place was this ornate piece of furniture where you hang your coats. You opened up the doors, you pushed aside the clothing, the back panel would slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall, and there was room for the 12 of us to crawl through that hole, get on the other side, and stand between 2 buildings. And of course, the last person had to close the door and put the clothing back in place, close the back panel. And 12 of us were standing between 2 buildings, and it was freezing cold and snowing. Now, the buildings, fortunately for us, were connected on the street level, but the roof was open. And from the roof, and it was snowing, it was cold. So the roofs were separated. We are standing there all night long, and we hear screaming, yelling, shooting, dogs barking, crazy all night long. And towards morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, we dared to come out. And when we came out of this room, we couldn't believe what our eyes are just looking at. We saw these dead bodies torn apart by dogs, by Nazi dogs. Women holding their babies, and some of them were torn apart. You couldn't recognize them. There were people going around in push carts, picking up all these bodies and pieces of bodies and putting it on push cart, and then taking it to the Ghetto Square, and they were piling them up one on top of another in Ghetto Square. And then these cultured people came with gasoline and poured gasoline over the bodies and started a human bonfire in Bochnia Ghetto Square. It's a sight that I will never forget. I'll never forget this sight. The smell, what was going on, my God. And so, but I knew that my sister Lola and Michael were hiding someplace else. And I knew that Michael's parents were hiding in a doghouse. You heard right, a doghouse. So when you opened the floor from the doghouse, there was a stepladder, and there was room for 7 people to hide in that doghouse. And they had provisions for 7 people. Anyway, so I wanted to see what happened. When I came there, this is what I found. I found my sister Lola and Michael, and Lola was screaming. Apparently, Lola was in a different hiding place with Michael. They were hiding in a water tower on top of a factory and a water tower. And they were like knee deep in water and was snow. And when it was all over, they came out and they wanted to see what happened to their parents and his family. And they came to the doghouse, and this is what they found. All 7 of them with bullet holes in their heads. And Sister Marika, his little sister, on her birthday, Lola made her a doll. She's still holding on to the doll. According to Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within 24 hours after. So Michael found a rickety wheelbarrow, and he put the family on this wheelbarrow, and they're wheeling him to the ghetto, Bochnia Ghetto. They had a ghetto there. I'm sorry, Bochnia Cemetery above the ghetto. And Lola's holding on. You see Marika still holding the doll. All these pictures were my sisters making from memory. In the cemetery, they found a shovel. They were able to dig out, and Lola with her bare hands, because the ground was frozen. It was very hard, and they put the family into the ground, and they covered everybody up, and then they left. When they left the cemetery, they were holding each other and crying. Now, to tell you what happened from this point on, and how we, my sister Lola and Michael, her husband, I and my whole family were able to get smuggled out of the ghetto, is the stories that would take too long, much, much too long for me to tell. So I will skip this, but I will tell you this much. Don't miss it. If you haven't heard the story, I would highly recommend that you take my book and you read it. The book is called Living a Life That Matters, From Nazi Nightmare to American Dream. Yes, very interesting. The book is not all about the Holocaust, but it's also after the war and coming to America. It's a beautiful love story, beautiful story. So now we're outside the ghetto, and Michael befriends a truck driver who was hauling coal on a truck. It was coal on top, and he asked him, please, I'll give you a lot of money if you convert your truck into a double-decker. There'll be coal on top, and between the coal and the chassis, some people can hide. And if you take us to the Czech-Polish border, we will have a smuggler waiting there for us. We'll pay you a lot of money if you can do that. And he agreed. He agreed to do it. So, which is what he did. And every trip, there were 10 people that could lay like sardines inside this truck under the coal, and he would take them to the border. The first people going in the truck with 8 other people were my sister Lola and her husband Michael. Why did they go first? Because you couldn't always trust these truck drivers. They would take your money and then they would turn you into the Gestapo, the SS, and they would get paid for turning in Jewish people who tried to escape. So we couldn't trust them. So we made up a password between us, and Michael and Lola went back. When the driver comes back with the right password, then you can trust them, which is exactly what happened. And they left. And it was about a 2-day trip, approximately. And when the driver came back 2 days later, and he had the right password, that meant we could trust them. They arrived okay to the border. So now it was a next group of people, 8 other people plus 2 from our family. You see, we were able to take out about 50 other survivors outside of the ghetto. The story is going to tell you how the book. And because we took them out, there was a wealthy family, and they were paying for the trip because it cost a lot of money for a truck driver to risk his life to take us to the border. So each person had to pay a lot of money. We didn't have the money. So they paid 2 from our family with each trips of 8 from his family. And now that was my turn and my little brother. My oldest brother, Morris, was caught and they executed him. They found he was falsifying some documents. So that's part of the stories that I can't go into right now. So now we're laying down in this truck. There's coal on top of us, and there was a double-decker. We're laying on our side next to each other, and my little brother. There were 5 on top and 5 below us, head to toe. Don't ask. It was quite a hard trip. After we left Bochnia, about 2 hours out of Bochnia, we're being stopped. Halt! And we see through the cracks of the truck a bunch of Nazi soldiers with their rifles. We figured that's it. Somebody turned us in, they're gonna kill us. And they're talking to the truck driver. We don't hear what they're talking because the roar of the engine is so loud, we couldn't hear. Even though I understood in German, I could not hear a word. And after a while, the truck started to move again. So we felt a little better, letting us go until we looked through the crack. We see on one step by the driver, there's a soldier standing with a rifle. On the other step, there's a soldier with a rifle. Now we hear soldiers walking on top of the coal, and coal is starting to filter through the truck. And my little brother is about to sneeze. I'm holding his nose. I don't know what's going on. But we figured they're taking us to a forest or a cemetery. They're going to shoot us all. And this was like 2 or 3 hours that we were traveling with the soldiers on top. And then the truck stops. And the truck stops, we are saying our prayers. And all of a sudden we hear, Dankeschön, Dankeschön, thank you, thank you. They were just hitchhikers. Imagine, imagine the surprise that we had. It was like being born again. They were only hitchhiking. Excuse me. When we arrived to the border, it's also a long story, but it was nighttime and there was a big forest, and when the truck stopped, we all came out of the truck. He told us to go 300 yards into the top of the mountain, into the forest. You'll see a tool shed. Inside the tool shed, there is a smuggler. He happened to be a forest ranger. He also smuggled people through for a lot of money anyway. And we did that. It was nighttime. We came to that tool shed and we opened it up, and he was so happy to see us. He took us to the border on a big forest there, and we had to shimmy our way up to a certain point. Then we had to lay on our stomach and watch on top of the mountain. We can see the soldiers with their dogs at the borderline, walking back and forth, back and forth. And at 3 a.m., the soldiers would walk down the hill and they would meet other soldiers who were replacing them. And then others would come down. But before the others went up, and there was a little ceremony between them. In those 5 or 10 minutes, we can cross the border. So we had to lay there quiet until the soldiers were far enough down the hill with their dogs so they wouldn't hear us. We shimmied our way up on top of the mountain there. He picked up the barbed wires and he told us to cross. And he told us that on the other side of the barbed wires, there's a big ravine and you can fall down if you're not careful. Sit down at the end of the mountain, hold your hands and slide down. You won't get hurt. If you're not going to slide down, you're going to tumble. And if you tumble, it's going to be all over. They're going to hear you and it's going to be all over. So this is what we did. We went on the other side of the mountain. We sat down, we held our hands, we slid down the mountain, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see the hand in front of you. It was so dark at night. And when we came down the hill, there was a plateau. I asked my little brother, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yes, he's okay." Then suddenly somebody taps me on my shoulder. I jump out of my skin. Who in the world out in the wilderness in the dark, you couldn't see a hand in front of you? Who is? I hear a voice saying, "Beinisch." Now, Beinisch, only immediate family calls me like that. This is in Yiddish. Otherwise, I was Benek, Bundy, but never Beinisch. He says, "I'm your uncle's, your uncle, your mother's brother. Belo is his name. How did you find me here? What did you know? Where did you come here out of nowhere?" He says, when Lola and Michael passed, they contacted me. They got in touch with me, and they told me exactly the spot where you will come down. So I waited here for you, and I'm going to take you into the city, Bardiof, and from the city, tomorrow, a day later, we will take you across the border. Somehow you have to smuggle across the border, from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. Hungary was a free country. This was in 1943, in the summer of 1943. Hungary was a free country, and Czechoslovakia was occupied, but Czechoslovakia wasn't that as bad as Poland. We were now in Czechoslovakia. My uncle takes me to another uncle. It's a whole big story. And again, the next day we had to smuggle through the border, which we did. Please read my book. I can't go into details because I'll run out of time. So now we're in Hungary. We took a train and we went to Budapest. We arrived into Budapest. My sister Lola and Michael meet us and we embraced. We were so happy and we have a good meal and we rested up a little bit. Then we had to take a train to go from Budapest to Munkács, Hungary, which was a whole night trip. Which is my uncle Bela did. He came with us, and Lola and Michael stayed in Budapest, and I and my little brother and my uncle went on the train ride going to Munkács. Munkács is where my sister Lola is, my grandparents from my mother's side, my uncles, aunts, cousins, the whole family, huge family. They were all waiting there for us. And they were so happy, we all embraced. And we're in a free country, now free. We couldn't believe what was going on. We see people.
Ben,
yes.
Ben, can we only have a little bit, but can we go into maybe the diamonds leading to the camp?
Okay, yeah, I'm getting into this. Yeah, all right, so I'm okay. Anyway, people in Hungary couldn't believe the stories that we were telling and what's happening in Poland, but they said this will never happen in Hungary because Hungary is an ally of Germany. However, my uncle believed me. This is the uncle that he asked us to stay in his house. He happened to be a very wealthy man, and he had a store selling dry goods like for suits and dresses. And above the store, he had his house. And we stayed with him. And I said, Uncle, you know, if the Nazis ever come in, they will confiscate, they will take everything away from you. It would make a lot of sense if you'd converted some of your valuables into diamonds or something we can hide on our body. And he listened to me. One day he comes home with boxes full of shoes. And he tells us a beautiful pair of black shoes for every member of the family. He tells us that in the heels of the shoes, there are diamonds. Use it only in a life-threatening situation. If you can save your life, know you have diamonds in your shoes. He gave every member a pair of shoes. And life is going on as normal. And we're waiting for my parents to come. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. After 3 months, my parents are still not here. Somebody from Bochnia came across who knew my parents, and he told us the story. As my parents with the other 10 people went into this truck, other 8 people, there were 10 of them all together, went into this coal truck. Some Polish farmers saw them go in and they called the police, and they came and they pulled everybody out of the truck. This is also one of my Lola's pictures, pulled everybody out of the truck. 10 people plus the driver, now they were 11. They lined them up against the building and everyone was shot and killed. So he told us this story. So we now knew what happened to our parents. It's another story how they buried him and all that. But in March of 1944, the Nazis marched in right into Hungary like they were invited guests. And when they came, they knew what to do right away. They formed the ghettos. They took away the Jewish businesses and Star of David's. They knew everything. And they did it so fast. They did it in 1 month, in 5-6 weeks. And this is what they told us. All the Jewish people will be relocated to Germany because Germany needs workers. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry, but leave everything else behind. If anyone is found hiding, he will be shot immediately. So people believed it, and they marched us out to the railroad tracks, and they had cattle cars waiting for us, and they put us in 82 cattle car. 82 cattle car, and to describe how it was in the cattle car is unbelievable. It wouldn't be so bad 80 in the cattle car if we had no bundles and valises, but with those bundles, it got so tight that if somebody wanted to sit down, someone else had to stand up. All we saw in the corner was 2 buckets of water. There was nothing else. We're standing, hardly room to lay down, to sit down. We're all standing there waiting. After the 2 buckets of water were gone, after 1 day, 2 days, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. So people started to use those buckets, and we filled up those buckets. And after we filled out the buckets, it started to flow over. And don't ask, now we were happy to sit on bundles, rather that we had bundles to sit on rather than sitting on the human waste on the bottom. 2 days, on the 3rd day, now the people were screaming, yelling, and some people were dying, children, infants, pregnant women. We arrived at a place called Auschwitz, and we see a sign saying Auschwitz. Auschwitz means Auschwitz in German. It was a Polish town, but the train didn't stop there at the station, but it continued about 2 or 3 kilometers inside, and it stopped in a camp, and it said, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives him freedoms. That was Auschwitz. We didn't know about an Auschwitz. We didn't know about Auschwitz or Auschwitz, but it looked like a labor camp. There were barracks. And after about an hour or 2, the train started to move again and moved for another 3 kilometers. And it stopped in a place called Birkenau. Birkenau was an offshoot, a part of Auschwitz. Auschwitz had 3 camps, and they were all connected like. And we arrived in Birkenau. It was still dark. They opened up the doors, and they were screaming. All hell broke loose. The Germans, the Nazis were screaming, raus, raus, schnell, and there were dogs barking, and there were inmates yelling in all different languages, inmates with striped clothes yelling all different languages, raus, raus, schnell, schnell. Leave all your belonging where it is. Don't you pick up anything from the cattle car. Leave all your belongings. Women and children to the right and men to the left. I'm sorry, there's something wrong with my throat. So now I'm holding on to my little brother and my sister, Goldie, and we are being pulled apart, never to see each other again. My sister, my little brother, went straight to the gas chambers. Of course, I didn't know about gas chambers. And by the way, the picture you see is similar, but it's daytime. Ours was nighttime. And all we saw was some chimneys, 4 or 5 chimneys with smokes coming out of the stacks and flames, and smoke is all over, and like ashes are flying all over, ashes. And we couldn't figure out what it is. Who knew? We didn't know that we were walking on top of the ashes of our dear departed ones. We had no idea what was going on. Excuse me, there was someone at the door, and my little dog is barking. So as we're coming forward and forward, we see a doctor wearing a white frock with a white glove. He's going right, left. And that was right, left. We didn't know what he was doing or what he was doing. But when I came close enough to him, and I heard him ask in German, one of the young men, he asked him, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? Or would you rather go by truck? The young man said, oh, he had a bad knee, he would rather go by truck. Poor soul, not realizing that meant certain death. But I didn't know it either, but it didn't make sense. Why would he ask such a question? I can see the barracks. I figured he's testing people to see if they're strong enough to work. So I went in front of him. I tell my uncle, wait till you go after me and tell him you're healthy, you can run 5 kilometers, you can work. So I went first, and before he even asked me a question, by the way, this was Dr. Mengele. He was the angel of death. He decided who should live, who should die with the flick of his finger, just like that. I didn't know that, no one knew, but I figured, well, you better be healthy to work. So I said to him, before he asked me, I saluted him and I said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy and I can work. He asked me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? I said, jawohl, yes. He sent me to the left. Now, to continue telling you, my uncle and cousin, they were both sent to the left. All 3 of us are being taken to a big infirmary, and they tell us to get undressed and get out of our shoes and clothes and go to these barbers. They'll cut your hair, then go to the showers. I hated to get out of my black shoes. I had diamonds in it. My uncle, who gave me those shoes, got out of his shoes. His son, my cousin, got out of his shoes because they ordered us to. But I decided I'm going to keep the shoes. And I walk out naked, if you can picture this, with my beautiful black shoes to the barbers. And they clipped my hair all over my body. And they didn't say anything about my shoes. Then I go into the showers with my shoes. Anyway, we got out of there. And just to give you an idea of what happened, after I got my striped clothes and uniform, and they also gave us a pair of shoes with wooden soles and canvas on top, I put those on. I put my black shoes under my arm and to my jacket, and we walked to our barrack. It was still dark. We lined up, and the Stubenmelder, the man in charge of the barrack, comes out and he counts us. And this is what he says to us in a broken German. Ha, you Hungarian Jews, you think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes, those flames? Those are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave and do exactly what you're told, this is how you're going to wind up. ashes. Well, when we heard that, we couldn't believe this. This is the 20th century. These are cultured people. How can they burn human beings, my sister, my brother, ashes? We couldn't believe this. And what happened from this point on is much too long of a story. Again, I can only tell you that they had 4 crematoriums, and they also had 2 or 3 fire pits, because the overflow from the crematorium, and that they didn't have place to burn, and from the gas chambers, they didn't have time to burn in the crematorium. They were dumping them in trucks, and they were dumping infants on top of the half-dead bodies. They weren't all dead. And they were taking them to these fiery pits and dumping them then. And my barrack was 1 barrack away from the one fiery pit. And I can hear day and night screams and screams. At first, we didn't know it was screaming, yelling, crying, or singing, or chanting. But we found out later on, and to keep telling you the horrible stories what went on. And what we went through in 2 weeks in Auschwitz is a story in itself. And after 2 weeks, they put us in trucks and they take us to a labor camp called Dernau. Dernau was a rock quarry. All they had in that rock quarry was, as they dynamited the mountain, the boulders were coming down. It was our job with sledgehammers to break it down into smaller pieces, throw it into these mining carts, run it down the hill, and down the hill, they would make it into gravel. They had grinding machines, make it into gravel, push it up again. It was very hard work, and I figured my uncle will never survive this labor. So I bribed the chef in the kitchen, who happened to be in the same barrack, sleeping in the same barracks that I was. I bribed the chef in the kitchen with my diamonds to give my uncle a job in the kitchen. He took the diamonds and he gave my uncle a job. Remember, I was the only one who had diamonds left. I gave it all to him. He gave my uncle a job. Got a little easier on us because my uncle could eat in the kitchen. Anyway, it's a long story, but every day as we came back from work into the camp, we had to line up around rows of 5s, and every worker inside the camp had to come out to be counted. So my uncle came in front of me and my cousin was behind me, and when they're counting a row of 5, and they count and they count and they keep counting. They don't stop. And all of a sudden, the commandant comes down and he says, I'm going to teach you Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. He'll teach us a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 of the inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders the henchmen who pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. And as they're pulling out every 10th person, I can see my uncle who is in front of me is going to be 10. So I push him behind me and I took his place. They took us number 10s in the middle of the yard, and they brought down 1 by 1, 2 or 3 feet long, hardwood stakes, and they brought down a sawhorse. You're looking at it right now. And this is what they ordered us to do. Tiptoe, bend over the sawhorse, but your stomach cannot touch the 2x4 on the sawhorse. One man would pull your trousers real tight while the other man is hitting you, and you had to count out loud. If you miscounted, they started from 1 again. So, and if your heels touch the ground, you start from one again. If your stomach touches the 2x4, they start from one again. I happened to be number 4. There were 3 men ahead of me. The first man went up, and every time they hit him, you can see a line of blood coming right through the trousers. They hit you so hard that you can't imagine, with these sharp 1-by-1-inch stakes. Anyway, he counts 1, 2, 3, 4. After about 15 or 20, he falls apart and he falls on the floor. When he falls on the ground, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face, stand up. The poor guy couldn't. When the commandant pulls out his revolver, he shoots him right in the temple. His girlfriend, who was with him, walks over and gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed a heroic act. He killed somebody. Number 2 came up. Number 2 the same way. He fell. The commandant goes over and shoots him. Number 3 was a younger man. He miscounted 2. He touched the 2x4. Again and again, he yelled out, "Please have mercy on me. Don't kill me." So the commandant says, "Then stand up and come over here and face me." The poor guy stands up, walks over about 4 steps, and his knees gave out from under him. He fell. The minute he falls, the commandant goes over and shoots him. Now we had 3 bodies in front of me. Ben Lesser is number 4. I remember walking up to that sawhorse. I tiptoed, I bent over, and I said to myself, "Ben, this is it. You better do exactly what they told you." And I bent over and I said, "You won't live another 10 minutes if you don't." So I walk over, tiptoe, bent over without touching the 2x4. One man is pulling my trousers and they start to hit, and I start to yell out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Anyway, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I made it. When I made it, you can hear a pin drop in the whole camp. No one believed that anyone could survive this. Please, anyone could survive this. Excuse me. When I survived, the man who was pulling my trousers tells me to walk over to the commandant and thank him. So I stand up and I walk over to the commandant, blood's running down my trousers. And I came to him and I saluted him and I said, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant. Thank you very much, Herr Kommandant." When he hears that, he puts his arm on my collar and he twists me around facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now you see it could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about." While this is happening, there is a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates and they were pulling them in. You couldn't recognize them. They were bloody. When the commandant saw that, just like a child who gets sick of playing with a toy, he tells all of us, number 10, to go back to our line, which we did. We went back to our line. And he orders his henchmen to bring down 3 gallows, and they hung those 3 inmates. It's a long story in between, but I can't talk to you except to tell you that for weeks I couldn't lay on my back. I had to lay on my stomach because of these welts. One night we heard cannon fire. The front was closing in, And the next morning when we reported to work, there was a loudspeaker saying, nobody's going to work today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up a rows of fives and they march out. And we line out the rows of fives and they marched us out. My uncle was already in the kitchen. We couldn't even say goodbye to him. We never saw him again. The death march is a story in itself, because if you could not keep up with the soldiers, they simply shot you. Imagine 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I thought it was 3 weeks. In my book, I wrote it was 3 or 4 weeks. Day and night, it didn't matter anymore. We were like zombies just walking. We didn't know what time it was, what day it was. Recently, a professor in Germany sent us a email saying that, Mr. Lesser, I read your book, but you're wrong in your book. You say that you marched for 3 weeks. It was really 7 weeks. It was 450 kilometers from Dernau to Dachau. I'm sorry, from Dernau to Buchenwald. We arrived at Buchenwald, I guess 7 weeks later. A few of us who are still left. In Buchenwald, they told us to go into this barrack and they'll feed you. You'll take a shower. This picture, by the way, is a picture of my shower. This is a whole story by itself. I don't have the time to tell you. But next morning, we all had to be in the same spots because Buchenwald is also being evacuated, which we did. We went to the Buchenwald, we ate, we slept, and we had new shoes and new fresh clothes, and they marched us out about 300 yards out of the camp. You see a line of cattle cars lined up again, and they counted us 82 cattle cars, and they tell us to go in. I tell my cousin, I'll push you up, find a spot near a wall where we can rest. Because I remember going to Auschwitz, there were people all around us and it was terrible. And he did, he found a spot against the wall and we were both have a pretty good spot. And after they filled up the wagon, they closed the doors. An hour later, they opened up and they threw in 80 breads, 1 bread for each person. Imagine those. Those people who were next to the door were grabbing 4 or 5 breads. I and my cousin were against the wall in the back. We had nothing. And I don't know where we're going, for how long we're going. I knew I had to get a bread. So I started to climb over the inmates' heads. And as I'm climbing over the heads, one inmate had a pocket knife and he stabs me. I feel a stab. And I feel my mouth is filling up with blood. I couldn't stop. I had to go get a bread. And I finally found a man with a bunch of breads and I pull out a bread. I pull it in my back pocket. He punches me. I go back to my cousin. My cousin says, Ben, what's happening? You're bleeding. I put my finger here and went right through my tongue. I had this terrible gash here. Don't ask me how I survived. I rationed that bread every night at midnight. No one can see us. A piece of bread the size of a half an egg, a ham and a half an egg for me. It lasted us 2 weeks. The trip took 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, we arrived and they opened up the door and they said, anyone who can go out, walk into this camp of Dachau. We were in Dachau now. This is what I found out later, out of the 6,000 people, only 18 of us walked out. And out of the one cars that we were in, maybe about 4 of us walked out. And I and my cousin were among them. Only 18 walked out, but today I'm the only survivor from this death camp. It's a notorious death camp. Everybody knows what happened. 6 weeks without food or water. Some of us had this one bread, but and those people who had 3 or 4 breads died too, because they didn't have water to digest it with. So everybody, as you see on the train, was dying. 3 days later, anyway, they brought us into the camp. They put us into a barrack right next to a mountain full of dead bodies. It was near the crematorium. I guess they ran out of coal to burn the bodies, so they piled them up. And we were right next to that. And they put us next to a wall. They didn't give us a bunk to lay down on the floor. 1 day, 2 days, after the 3rd day, we hear Befreiung, liberation, Americans, Americans. I tell my cousin, let's go out and see. And we held each other. We come out. We see inmates are crawling on their hands and knees and kissing the boots of the GIs. They looked like angels to us. They liberated us. And I'm standing there with my cousin when 2 soldiers walk up to 2 GIs, walk up, and in their hand they had a can of Spam. They opened up that can and they handed it to us. It smelled so good. We made a mistake. We ate some of it. And as we ate some of it, we both came down with dysentery. Night of liberation, my cousin dies in my arms. And I keep talking to him and talking to him. And they saw what was happening. They came and took him away. So I followed. I wanted to see, where are you taking him? After a few steps, my knees gave out and I fell. When I fell, they pushed me aside. I lay there for a few hours. A man walks up to me, nicely dressed, and he introduces himself that he is a Jesuit priest, a Polish Jesuit priest. He came there with nuns and doctors from Paris, from France. And they're going to open up they're opening up a field hospital in the yard of Dachau. And he's going to take me there. So he spoke to me in Polish and I spoke Polish. And then he puts me on his shoulder like a sack of bones, which I was. I weighed about 60 pounds. I was 16 years old at the time. I'll never forget what he told me. He says, Benek, I know what you went through. It's unbelievable, the injustice the Germans did to Jewish people. However, don't you ever abandon your noble religion. Don't you ever abandon your noble religion. To hear that from a Jesuit priest in 1945 was unbelievable. Now you can hear it, but not then. And he took me into a tent, and they had a cot there with a white sheet. They put me on the cot. The nun took my vitals, and I passed out. 2 months later, I wake up in St. Ottilian, in this monastery. You see the beautiful picture. The monks gave up one building to make into a hospital to heal the survivors from Auschwitz and from everywhere else. Anyway, it became a hospital. To continue telling you the story in details, what actually happened, and which I missed, I skipped so much because of time limitation. I could only tell you, well, my book, please. And I think Robin will tell you about the Zachor pin. I don't know if she did or not. You know, Zachor means remember, and specifically remember the Holocaust. That's a Hebrew word. And I hand out a pin for every listener to my story. And to date, we have given out over 1 million pins. And Robin is going to tell you a little about it. My hope is to see 6 million people wearing this pin in the world. to keep the memory alive and to be proud of this pin. Wear it with pride.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, my name is Robin Weber, and I am Ben's granddaughter. Thank you so much all for attending this event. And as Ben had mentioned, just to quickly recap, Ben had survived numerous ghettos, 4 concentration camps, the Death March, and the notorious death train, in which 3,000 inmates walked on and 18 walked off. And he
Excuse me, Robin. I may correct you there. We found out from this professor from Germany that 3,000 was wrong. It was 6,000 inmates.
Oh.
And only 18 walked out, and I'm the only one.
It's doubled. 6,000 inmates walked on. Thank you for the correction. And 18 walked off. Ben and his cousin Isaac were one of the 18. Ben is, we had found out not too long ago that he is the only survivor left of the notorious death train to Dachau. And in part of the Zahor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, we provide to listeners a pin that means that's Zahor. It is in Hebrew, looks like this here. It is, and it means remember for anybody who listens to a Holocaust survivor. We also created the Zahor collection. I do not have an image on here right now, but well, maybe I do actually. Hold on, do you see that? There we go. We have the new Zahor collection, in which we have bracelets in silver, white gold, and 14-karat gold of the Zahor bracelet, a pendant, should you want to wear it around your neck, for both men and women. And this is just something, a timeless gift of remembrance for you to always remember and to never forget. Keep in mind, it's not just about the Holocaust, it's also to represent tolerance, so we can all live in a peaceful, happy world. And I will bring this back to a Q&A.
Thank
Right,
you.
hello, can everybody hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, I want to get some, if you've got questions, please type them in and I will try to get to all of them. We got 2 from Renelle Wolf that I'd like to address first. They are related. Let's see. Renelle Wolf is asking for ideas to help create a poster on how to fight anti-Semitism. I hope I get this right. And let's see, the second one includes, it's fighting anti-Semitism. And yes, what images from your story can be paired with the concept of, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Tikkun Olam there, because Renelle would like some images for a poster. What images from your experience say Tikkun Olam there? And also, thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
Yes, very good question. But I tell you, my feeling is, and this is fact, I mean, it all started with hate. Hitler and the Nazis did not start with killing. It all started with hate propaganda, and the hatred has to stop. So I believe, because think about it, the German people were not murderers and killers when the war began. The hatred changed them into monsters. And this is how far hatred will go. So I think a sign like that should say, stop the hate. It's not just against anti-Semitism, hatred of any sort. You have to show hate where it leads to. It leads to killing. So show where hatred with an arrow where it leads to. So the hatred has to stop, any form of hatred. And that's all. If I had to make a sign, this is the kind of a sign I would make.
I actually represent and I work on a community effort for against anti-Semitism here in our community. And the biggest thing that I can tell you and the students of all is we need to be informed about our differences because that will help living a tolerant world. In doing so, we need to know the differences between stereotypes and prejudice and understanding our biases, whether you think you have them or not. When you understand that, then we can help fight it. And then we can accept each other all through and through. As far as posters, we do have on our website on the ishoutout.org. This is the information here. We do have some posters that your teachers or students can go ahead and download to present to their classes, or you can hang up, or you can use it as stickers on your computer, as well, to shout out for what you believe in, whether you shout out for against bullying, against discrimination, for tolerance, for peace, for kindness, all of these things which help with understanding intolerance in order to live a tolerant world with a tolerant world. So these are all very important. We do have those assets on there. And as well on the Zahor Holocaust curriculum website, it's called the zahorlearn.org. That website itself has an entire chapter referencing differences and how we can combat and live a peaceful world. But it's really distinguishing because, as my grandfather has always stated in the very beginning, Hitler didn't start with killing, he started with hate. And that came from him being bullied and then him being the bullier. So it is recognizing from inside and how it represents outside. So if we start from within, we could definitely combat hate.
Okay, our next question comes from Sergio Gomez, who had to leave, but he left his question here. It says, how does telling your story help cope with the trauma you've experienced? When it comes to trauma, the opposing viewpoint is that it should be forgotten and left in the past for the sake of healing. Do you find that telling your story can sometimes conflict with how you heal from the experience? If not, how does telling your story instead empower you?
I experienced trauma just like anyone else, believe me. But I dedicated my life. This is what I have to do. Believe me, I have sleepless nights after I speak too, like anyone else would. But it has to be done, and someone has to do it. And I feel I'm one of these people. I hope that there are many more, but unfortunately, as time goes on, there are fewer and fewer of us survivors left, and fewer that can even talk about it because it hurts too much. But I know that someone has to do it. And this is the whole idea. This is how I started the Zahor Foundation. And I know it's going to be with me day and night. And it's become part of me. It's not pleasant, but it has to be done. The memory has to be kept alive. I feel like our dear departed ones, all 6 million of them, are crying out to the world, Zahor, remember us. We were here. Don't forget us.
Okay, our next question comes from Emily Lucana. I believe that you are so inspiring that you are extremely brave on sharing your story and giving the message to remember the Holocaust to promote a more peaceful world in the upcoming future. What are other personal reasons that have encouraged you to speak of your stories as a Holocaust survivor to others?
Well, I believe that while individuals can't always choose what happens to them, but whether it's a crisis or calamity, people can choose to either let it ruin their lives or learn from it and move forward. It's essential to understand the consequences of personal choices. It's possible that tragedy and trauma would be a reason to stop living, but it's also possible to live through those extreme circumstances and commit to a life that has meaning, a life that matters.
Okay, we've got, I've gotten through the student questions, and if anybody, you're still welcome to ask questions. If I may ask a question, could you comment on your experiences with either, perpetrators and or their descendants that you've met after 1945?
Perpetrators, no, I didn't have much experience with that. I didn't mingle with the outside world. I was always among survivors. And so I never had a chance to come across. And all my speaking engagements in schools, I never had anyone question me about the correctness about the Holocaust itself. And I never had this experience.
Oh, okay. Maybe I meant it a little differently. If I recall, you once met the grandson of Rudolph Hess there, and I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Certainly. Rudolph Hess was the commandant of Auschwitz, and one day I see in the newspaper, in the Wall Street Journal, on the front page, the word Hess, and I realizing who Hess was, I wanted to read the article, and I started to read it, and I saw they're talking about his grandson, Rainer Hess, not Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess was responsible in killing over 1 million Jewish people. Rainer Hess was going around the schools and talking about tolerance and love instead of hate. The same thing that I was doing, walking from school to school. So I had to meet him. It's a long story, but I did finally find out that my daughter found out where he lives in Stuttgart, and we got in touch with each other, and we spoke on the phone for over an hour and a half, the first time we talked to each other. And then how we met in Germany. So, and after a while, he and I in Germany went to school, from high school to high school, speaking about tolerance and about the Holocaust. And he and I became very close because of the fact that it doesn't matter who you are, you're human, we're all God's creation. Whether you're German or Polish or Jewish or Muslim, it doesn't matter. We're God's creation, and we're here on this earth. And if he could feel the same way that I do, I became very close with him. And in fact, he came out to Las Vegas a few times, and I went to Germany, and we met quite a few times.
Okay, thank you. We've got some more questions now coming in from Janine Tortortella is asking about a different part of your legacy when you were married, how many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren you have there. And they're important to keep your story told for future, here we go, future generations. And I'm sure they're very proud of you.
Okay, despite Hitler, I'm married to a wonderful wife, over 71 years now, Jean, the love of my life. And I have 2 wonderful daughters, 4 grandchildren, and we only showed 3 great-grandchildren, but by now I have 5. So despite Hitler, we're starting a wonderful family. We started a wonderful family. Lola, on the other hand, she survived, of course, and she had a wonderful life. She was on the religious side, and her son with the beard right next to her. Her other son is next to him, her daughter next to her on the other side. And that's a family they created. And by today, she passed away about almost 3 years ago. And by today, the family grew to be about close to 300 or 400. So despite Hitler, we are well and we are thriving. Thank you for that question.
Okay, from Heather Betts, how did you know you wanted to write a book and tell your story? Someone in my extended family is another survivor, and I would love for her to tell her story. Do you have any suggestions as to how to make her more comfortable to tell her story? I don't want her story to be forgotten.
Well, it's as simple as that. I had a lot of notes, and I'm sure she does too. And I put all these notes together. So my memory came back from those notes. And even to this day, there are things that I come back to me now that I didn't put in the book. And those things will be corrected in the future. But that simple as that. Make yourself notes and then compile all these notes, and you will have, before you know it, you'll have a book. Just tell it the way you would tell the story of your life. And if it's a memoir, a life story, just continue from the days that you remember till the day of the present. It's not so hard.
Okay, and we got many people who are expressing their gratitude, thanking you very much for this, myself included. I think we're out of specific questions though, unless anyone wants to ask another one. Okay, yes. Okay, so I think that's it for our questions there. Thank you so much for this. I remember hearing you back at Middle Tennessee State University back in 2009 and 2011, and I've been really wanting the students and faculty of our college to see you. So I feel very grateful that we've been able to do this.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And I
David,
feel honored.
David, could you?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, David, could you explain the details of how people that were on this call are going to get the link to the recording? Because I think there were a lot of people that perhaps could not attend that would.
What we're going to do is Jill Santiago and I are going to, I'm going to upload this and then we're going to figure it out. We will share it. We just don't have those details down just yet, but we will share it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
David, I put the center's email in the chat. So I was thinking maybe people who want to get the recording could email the center. And then once you and I sort out the how we're going to share it, we'll take care of that on our end.
Awesome.
So in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think, let's see. Thank you to everybody who's come. Thank you, Jill, for all of your help in putting this together. Really, thank you very much for all of your help in putting this together.
My pleasure.
And
can I say a couple words?
Please. Yes, please.
To the students, remember when you go home this evening, embrace your parents, hug and kiss them, and your siblings too. Appreciate them and don't take them for granted. Life is too short. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming here today.
God bless you, Mr. Lesser, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lesser.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Wave.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
David, thank you so much.
Oh yes, my pleasure. I've wanted this to happen for a decade, so I'm really happy that this has now finally happened.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And you'll send us the recording as well. And please make sure that you tag Zahor Foundation.
You bet. You bet.
Thank you.
And I will, regarding the honorarium, I will be following up with our school just to make sure that you get it.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much. You can just do it right through our website. It's easy peasy.
Yes, yes, it's coming through our schools. It's coming through the process of our school. So I will be monitoring it. I will be in touch. I will get in touch next week and let you know how things are going.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much. Everybody have a lovely afternoon.
Yes,
thank you. Thank you,
everybody.
Robin.
Take care.
So
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for being on, Ann.
I wish I could say it was my pleasure.
I know.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you, Jill. And,
You're welcome.
And thanks also to Robin, I guess, and of course to Mr. Lesser.
Yeah. So I wish you all a great day. And yeah, once we have the link available, we will let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so David, we'll be in touch then. I'll talk with you.
Yeah, what will happen is that I can just, once everything's downloaded, it'll get downloaded after this. I'll just upload it to Microsoft Teams chat. That's just the two of us, because I figured that that's how you do this.
Okay, perfect.
It's going to be there's going to be a lot of, what is it, gigabytes in this thing.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was concerned about. Okay, so then we'll talk over Teams.
Yeah, we'll talk over Teams. So I will upload it this afternoon, and then we can figure out where we go from there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was amazing. He was incredible. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Happy to be a part of it.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Take
All
care.
right.
Have a great day.
You too. And everybody else, we're signing off.
Take care.
Bye.